Today's Two Bad Hombres podcast is brought to you by The Athletic, premium coverage for passionate Detroit sports fans. Two Bad Hombres podcast listeners can get 20% off the first year of an annual subscription by visiting theathletic.com/DSP.
I was trying to get it how I live. I want them dead presidents. I want to pull up, head spin, get it, get fly. I got 6 jobs, I don't get tired. I don't get tired. I don't get tired. Get it, get fly. I got 6.
And we are still not tired on this week's episode, a post-Christmas, pre-New Year edition of Two Bad Hombres. I'm your host, Vito Jerome Turco, and my sidekick and broadcast partner in fun is not here with us this week, as he is off on vacation, enjoying himself with his wife, Andrea, and his 2 daughters, Olivia and Madeline, and more power to him. I hope he's having a great vacation and enjoying his time away from me this week, as I recorded Tigers Talk and now recording Two Bad Hombres without his lovely and manly presence. In his place is quite the man, in my brother, Dominic Joseph Turco. Dom, how are you doing?
Good, Vito. Thanks for having me on this episode of Two Bad Hombres.
Well, we are almost to 2018, and the Lions still have not found a way to win consistently and to beat the good teams. Who have they beaten that is good from their schedule this season? The Minnesota Vikings, the only team you can bring up, and beat them in Week 4 when Delvin Cook got hurt. That's why I believe the Lions won that game, 8-7 going into Week 17. Trying to go 9-7, and in Jim Caldwell's final season on the job as Lions head man, I think it should be, and I think it will be. Dom, what do you think about that?
Yeah, Jim Caldwell, he came here with the expectation of, getting to the playoffs, and the problem with the Lions this year was their running game is, it's been talked about pervasively this year. They're not going to have another 1,000-yard rusher. The last time they did have a 1,000-yard rusher was almost a decade ago now. Looking back on it, but yeah, this is a disappointing year considering that you got to go. You go into Cincinnati as a favorite, and Cincinnati's team this year they had injuries. They did have guys back though last week, and Vontaze Burfict, Georgia Loca played as well, so they did have guys back. But it's unfortunate that you can't run the ball. You're relying on Tion Green, and Theo Riddick to get you, between the tackles, between the A and B gaps. It's not going to work. They need to add a running back in the draft this offseason. There's a lot of good running backs. The best crop, Todd McShay has said it's the best crop of running backs we've seen in quite some time here. So yes, Caldwell, I think it should be his last year, but we're going to see where the ownership goes with this. We know about Martha Firestone Ford and how her close, amiable relationship with coaches says a lot about the loyalty that the ownership has for their coaches. And I don't know if they're going to pull the string yet. You got to see, they got to build the offensive line and running game, obviously. But also, look at the decisions, Caldwell has made. He didn't challenge the Golden Tate catch last week against the Bengals, in which it appeared in the slow-mo that Golden Tate did, in fact, make the catch. If he just challenged, he had 3 timeouts, nothing to lose. It's been, and obviously early in the year against the Falcons, Golden Tate stretching. He walked off the field like it didn't matter, no big deal. We're going to move on to next week, and quoting Bill Belichick on to Cincinnati. Very matter of fact, and I think the stoicism you see out of Jim Caldwell has also been has worked in the manner that he probably does not want it to work. It's okay to be stoic, but you got to be measured in it. And Jim Caldwell has not been measured in his stoicism.
I would say easily better than Jim Schwartz. And he brought the energy, the fire more than Jim Caldwell. Now the thing is, for Martha Firestone Ford, as you said, Dom, she loves herself some Jim Caldwell. Who is she going to end up playing bingo with every Monday if Caldwell is ousted? That's the biggest question here. Lion in front of the Lions. Now, Black Monday for coaches. I think you could and will see Jim Caldwell get fired, and rightfully so. Once again, who have they beaten this season? Not challenging plays and catches when he should have. Not having enough men on the field at times. 9 men on the field at one point, and you allow that to happen as a head coach. And now, obviously, not everything is controllable by the head man. It's about your assistant coaches and the players getting it done on the football field. And the running game, that's more on the GM, on the front office, for not having the right personnel. So you can't totally blame him for that, for their woes as a running game. Not having a 100-yard rusher in a long, long time now in a single game, that's not going to cut the mustard seed and allow you to win many games and to beat the good teams. That's more on the personnel decision-making men in the front office of the Lions. But I think we've seen enough from Jim Caldwell now in 4 years on the job to say that he should not be back as Lions head coach next season. And you can bring up he has a winning record with the Lions. He's a winningest head coach for the Lions in the Super Bowl era. How darn sad is that? But he doesn't have a playoff win. And I don't think he's a guy that could get you a playoff win and carry you to a Super Bowl appearance. The Lions desperately need that to happen. Will it happen anytime soon? Well, in my opinion, if it does, Jim Caldwell will not be the head coach of that Lions team. And now, you look from afar at the Cleveland Browns situation. They're about to go 0-16. I mean, is there any darn way that they're not going to go 0-16 playing the Pittsburgh Steelers? You would have to say no. Now, they might rest their players or allow them to sit after one quarter of play, one half a play. Maybe the Browns win, allowing themselves to go 1-15 this season. And that means they wouldn't tie the Lions' great mark from 2008 of going 0-16. The only franchise in NFL history to go 0-16 in a single campaign. Embarrassingly, that's a record the Lions hold. And is it a record that Lions fans, Dom, you think, want to erase from our collective memories? Is it something they want to get rid of, having that 0-16 mark by themselves? What are your thoughts on that?
Listen, I mean, doesn't strip away the fact that you lost 16 games in a season. I mean, you have a 16-game season, you couldn't win any game. No matter when it happened, no matter how many other teams go about this infamous feat, it is still leaves a mark on your franchise and the city as a whole and your fans as a whole. So this is something that's not going to go away. You know, we can all, I mean, if you want to have a pity party with Browns fans, go ahead. But, you know, that's something that's not going to go away as a Lions fan. And that's something you have to live with and something you're going to have to, you know, talk about with others and talk about the struggles and the triumphs. And that you don't have a lot of triumphs, but this is something where you're not, just because another team goes 0-16 doesn't mean it absolves you from being the worst ever. I mean, by all measurements, you know, you look at everything from, you know, personnel to ownership to coaching. To me, the Browns are in a better state than the Lions were in 2008. Now that Sashi Brown is out, you know, you had Matt Millen at the helm. You were continually bad after that. I do think, you know, the Browns are more promising on the offensive line and defensive lines respectively. So I think the roster, the personnel as well, was better too. And it's something that's not going to go away. And to me, this is still the worst team. It is the worst team in NFL history, and the Lions are. So that's not going to go away.
But should the Lions fans and those players from 08 want another team to go 0-16? That's my question for you here, Dom.
So it's easily distinguished. I mean, so this is what's going to happen. You're going to distinguish between another 0-16 and your 0-16 team. And like I said, the 0-16 team that's worse than the other 0-16 team is going to be remembered forever. You know, I think obviously the recency effect does play a factor in here as far as generations now go on. But I mean, when you look at it and you look at historians and people, you know, making the record, the Detroit Lions are the worst team in NFL history. And it does not look good. And it gives, I mean, you could have 5 0-16 teams, let's say, and historians will tell you if you had 5, let's just say, for instance, you had 5, historians told you that accurately that the Lions were the worst team. That doesn't say too much about the Lions.
So now we look at the fact, you kind of already brought it up yourself, you kind of already answered my question about who would win head-to-head now, the 08 Lions or these Browns that are about to go 0-16. Now, ESPN recently wrote an article and got the opinion of both the Lions beat writer and the Browns beat writer for ESPN.com. And they both picked, actually, the Detroit Lions because of the presence of one individual on that 08 squad who you kind of forget was on that team back then, Calvin Johnson. A future Pro Football Hall of Famer, potentially. Great young player at that time. Great career that he had with the Lions. Retired prematurely, probably because he got tired of losing, like Barry Sanders. And Anyways, that one player maybe could have carried the Lions to a win if the 08 and this Brown squad faced off with one another. And you look at the fact, too, if you bring into the equation that John Kitna was the quarterback at one time in that 08 campaign. Now he got hurt. Dan Orlovsky became the quarterback. We remember what happened, right, in Minnesota. He walked out of the end zone. You serious? Seriously, it did happen. Lions fans were disgusted, and with that collective roster and collective campaign, had to deal with it, though. Rod Marinelli was a head coach, got ousted because of it, was never a good fit as a head coach. But anyways, back to my original topic, my conversation piece here about Lions and Browns facing off head-to-head. You still are going to stick to that, to your point, that the Browns would beat those Lions down? Because I'm thinking, if you would have had a healthy Kitna, and they're presuming that, or they're bringing that into the equation that you actually have a healthy Kitna and Calvin Johnson, and then guess who else was a wide receiver for the Lions at that point? Roy Williams. So you had Roy Williams at one point. They traded him before the end of the season. But I'm saying if you had him, it's the roster to start the year. So Kitna, Roy Williams, and Calvin Johnson against that Brown squad, you might score enough to make up for the fact that the Lions had an extremely huge amount of defensive woes. No hugely productive defensive player. But maybe the offensive firepower would have made up for it, and the Lions would have won in such a matchup. Your thoughts on all of that now after hearing what I just said in my diatribe?
Yeah, I disagree. I think the Browns have better overall personnel. You look at, like I mentioned before, the offensive lines and defensive lines respectively. Whenever you can have a pass rusher, you have two really good pass rushers in the making, young pass rushers, young talent. Emmanuel Ogbah, Myles Garrett. You also have Jamie Collins, Danny Shelton. I mean, all those guys are Pro Bowl potential. Those four guys right there, those 4 or 5 guys I mentioned, are all Pro Bowl potential players. And Garrett's probably, he's been hurt, he's been off and on, but they've also had injuries too. If you look at, Joe Thomas hasn't played. Their offensive line's pretty good too. If you want to go there, so I think they do have talent on both sides. More talent than the Lions do. I think the Lions did not have anyone on defense. Their secondary was abysmal. Obviously, in Cleveland you have McCourty, you have a young Peppers. Your secondary is a little bit better as well. And you take off the offensive firepower, there's really no one else on the Lions. You could have Cam Newton and Steve Smith and, 3 good skill players, and that's about it. And mind you, they do have skill players too. You have Isaiah Crowell, you have a potential 1,000-yard rusher in Crowell. You have Josh Gordon, who missed most of the year. And you also have Duke Johnson Jr., who's a good complimentary back, he's like a scat back. There's one of the scat backs the Lions have. To me, this is a team. You take quarterback aside, the other parts of the team between the line of scrimmage, on both sides of the ball, I think the Browns would win the line of scrimmage battle with that 2008 Lions team 10 times, or I'll go 8 times out of 10. They'd win the line of scrimmage battle against them, and they'd ultimately be the better team and would beat them head to head.
Dom, you know what? You just ultimately hate the Detroit Lions and the franchise. It's a good point. I'm joking, okay? And there are valid reasons why you would think this Browns squad would beat the Lions head-to-head, the Lions team from 08, and because of the lack of defensive playmakers for that Lions team too, once again. Now, we have to take a quick commercial break here on this week's episode of Two Bad Hombres, Dom. When we get back, we have Zach Libby joining us from Hustle Belt. Now, that is SB Nation's premier Mid-American Conference blog. I chatted with him at the Quick Lane Bowl recently about Shane Morris and what his career was like, how he'll be remembered at Central Michigan. Will he be an NFL player? Also asked him about whether or not there has been an oversaturation of bowl games. Has that become a trend? I think so. We'll get his opinion on that as well, and on the college football playoff. Who does he have winning it all? All of that, plus Dom and I's thoughts on whether or not Lions fans should show up at Ford Field for the last game of the regular season in a meaningless game against the Brett Hundley-led Green Bay Packers. We'll be right back after this quick commercial break on Two Bad Hombres. Today's Two Bad Hombres podcast is brought to you by The Athletic, premium coverage for passionate Detroit sports fans. Two Bad Hombres podcast listeners can get 20% off the first year of an annual subscription by visiting theathletic.com/DSP.
Yeah, we coming now. Come
Vito Churko here with Zach Libby of SB Nation's Mid-American Conference blog, Hustle Belt. Zach, glad to have you along for the ride here on Two Bad Hombres this week as we are actually sitting side by side at Ford Field at halftime of the 2017 Quick Lane Bowl. And Duke is up 26-14 over Northern Illinois. But you are currently a Central Michigan University student, and I wanted to ask you about the bowl game. The famous Idaho Potato Bowl didn't end the right way for Central Michigan. Shane Morris really didn't end his career the right way, throwing 4 picks in his last game ever as a collegiate football player. And a fifth-year senior coming from U of M didn't have the greatest career at the University of Michigan, as you know, Zach. But at CMU, how will he be remembered?
I think he did what he was supposed to do. He was considered to be the plug or the bridge or the gap, you should say, between Cooper Rush, who's now with the Dallas Cowboys, and their future, which has been redshirt freshman Tony Poje from Lansing Catholic. He has been highly regarded from the program, and he's going to have 3 years of eligibility expected. So they needed that 1-year gap in which a transfer or somebody else could fit that plug and carry this team, which was very senior loaded. Finished with 26 touchdowns, 13 interceptions in the regular season. His stats may be a little bit skewed. Most of his interceptions occurred when his best weapons were hurt. Tyler Conklin, the tight end, he was right now the 8th ranked tight end in this year's draft. He was out with a foot injury. Corey Willis, just passed Antonio Brown for most career touchdown receptions later in the season. He was out too with a hand injury, so he was very limited for the good part, especially in the non-conference slate. So when he got all his weapons back, that's when they started to click, and it stinks because it's considering what he could have done had everyone had been healthy. I mean, 1 game behind Toledo for the MAC West championship, and I think despite the loss, I think this is what his career needed for Shane. As you said, not a highly regarded career at Michigan, but he got 13 straight starts, never missed a game, was never injured, led with passion. He was accepted early on, and he bought into the system, that's what they wanted.
And Zach, I think he was well-liked, well-respected by his former University of Michigan teammates and his Central Michigan teammates. And to have the season that he did, where he was a quarterback, like you said, all season long, and the team went to a bowl game, not the best result in the bowl game, but still a winning record, an 8-win team. So I would say for himself, after what happened at Michigan, where he wasn't highly successful, a good way for him to go out collegiately as a collegiate football player.
I would never see, even if, he tore up the MAC, he tore up the non-conference, I would never see him as a starter or anything, maybe doing much in the NFL. That's not to say that he wasn't bad. As we all know what he did in high school, what he could have done in Michigan had he had a right system at the right time, and what he's done this season. He's already happy with what he's done. He has a degree from Michigan. He's told me that that's all he's wanted to do in life is to graduate from Michigan. He's going for his master's at Central. So, he's a smart dude. Whatever he does in life, good for him. If he wants to do the NFL, good for him. I don't see it working for him, but if it does, we've seen Cooper Rush now backup for the Cowboys, Dan Lefevre, that standout decade ago. He's doing great things in the Canadian League. So if he wants to, he has the connection, considering that Harbaugh's, a quarterback guru, and Bonamago's a journeyman special teams coach. If he wants to, he can, but who knows?
And I heard he got an agent. So we'll see what happens. I see him as a practice squad quarterback at the next level. I don't see him starting. I don't even see him as a backup. I don't envision him even becoming that, but we've seen so many other guys that you wouldn't have envisioned as even being a backup, becoming backups in the NFL. So there surely could be that opportunity for Shane Morris, and it's really about injuries too, or a guy leaving a roster, and then a spot emerges, and then maybe he fills that roster void for an NFL team.
This quarterback draft next year is really, really stacked high with Josh Allen of Wyoming, who defeated Central Michigan, Josh Rosen, the guy from USC, it's not off my name right now.
Sam Darnold.
I don't see why he wouldn't try to go for it. If he doesn't get drafted, not surprising. Everyone gets a tryout. But if he doesn't, he's he's going to do good things for himself, whether he wants to do NFL, if he wants to try Canadian or even arena football, if that's what he really wants to do. But I think maybe if his career does finish at Central, like that's his final time ever throwing a football, he can look back and keep his head high. Like he took a team, that did finish under 500 the previous year, had very limited to work with. He had a running back that was a sophomore that did, explode, but it started off as a sophomore. Offensive line had some struggles. Wide receivers, lacking in the early on. So he did 8 wins is certainly nothing to hang your head low for.
Absolutely. And, how about the XFL? Vince McMahon of the WWE might be bringing back the XFL, the failed XFL after 1 year. Hey, he brings that back. There's Shane Morris, another opportunity for the guy. But realistically, like you said, Canadian Football League, I didn't even think of that. There could be an opportunity there. If he really wants to play bad enough, right, he might find himself an opportunity in a league such as that. But we're limited on time here as halftime is almost over. And Northern Illinois against Duke in the Quick Lane Bowl, not a ton of fans here at Ford Field. There never has been when it was the Motor City Bowl, the Little Caesars Pizza Bowl. And you see, from my vantage point, an oversaturation of bowl games at this point, of pretty much irrelevant bowl games. Have you seen that yourself? And do you think there simply are too many bowl games currently, Zach?
I like to think of it if I was in a perspective of a senior or a junior or anybody on a college football team where, your ceiling for your team, especially in the group of fives, where you're not going to go to the playoff. You're not going to those New Year's 6 bowls. So the chance to go to someplace different, someplace with, to increase your playing time or further your career past the month of November. These are what these bowls are for, especially for the Quick Lane Bowl, because this is Duke is not one of those mentioned teams in the ACC. They're 8th right now, if you put them all together. Or Northern Illinois, this is their 9th bowl game in 10 years, and this is the type of games that they go to. So you got to think of it. You got to think from the perspective of these players where this is their final chance to do something, and this is kind of special for them because, some may never even been playing inside a dome. This is an NFL stadium. This is cool for them. And, you could – oversaturation could be a good word for it, but they think of the student athletes first, and this is what it's meant for.
Zach, I'll leave you with this. Your pick to win it all at the D1 level. Of the 4 college football playoff teams, who do you have coming out on top?
Georgia. I've liked them since the Notre Dame win earlier in the season. They whooped up on Auburn in the SEC championship game. I like Baker Mayfield too, but Big 12 doesn't stack up against the SEC, and I think Clemson and Alabama are a year away.
Zach Libby, I'll let you go with that. Thank you much, man. And back here on Two Bad Hombres, that was Zach Libby offering his insight on the career of Shane Morris at Central Michigan. Zach Libby's current school as well. He is a man who is all about sports and writing, and he's written for the Free Press in the past, and now he is at Central Michigan once again as an undergrad student and doing some great things over there. I know he will be doing some great things in the future in 2018 and beyond as well. And we talked about the oversaturation of bowl games, which I think is an extremely huge concern for college football in this day and age, whether or not there are too many games that are meaningless bowl games to a large degree. And I think you're seeing the effects of it through attendance numbers being so darn low, such as at the Foster Farms Bowl, where you saw pretty much nobody in the stands leading up to kickoff. And that was a game between Arizona and Purdue. Still a Pac-12 and Big Ten squad, and not many fans in the stands. Not a good look for college football as a whole, Dom. And what are your thoughts on whether or not there has become an oversaturation of bowl games? Do you think there's something to that?
Yeah, I think for the common viewer, the whole oversaturation of football games is really predicated on someone's willingness to watch football games during, a holiday or during New Year's and Christmas. I think maybe is it overrated? No, I mean we've seen this forever. Obviously, there's so many bowl games. It's not like the clear blue sky. We have more. We haven't had irrelevant bowl games in the past. Look at all these bowl games, and yeah, a lot of them. You see a lot of 6-6 teams, 7-4. But this is a conversation people have been talking about forever. So if you want to do something to fix it, do something to fix it. But you got to remind you, I think advertisements, schools get recognition So even a team like UAB was a great feel-good story. They didn't have a football program. Just for them to be able to get back to a bowl game, really get back on the map as a bowl game that's been, that a university that's been tarnished by their lack of, or has been tarnished by them not being, in a bowl and not having a program for a little bit, for a year and a half. I think that says a lot too. But I do think, is there an oversaturation as far as a general question? I think there's always been a lot of bowl games. To be oversaturated means we've had more bowl games, and I don't think we've had more than years past and whatnot. I think it's a lot of names have changed. It's a really good way for universities to make money, and losing teams and teams to get universities, especially for people or players or recruits that are looking at schools to go to. 4 or 5 stars, 3 stars, walk-ons, and give them a chance to play. I always think this bowl game, I do think it's overblown. I mean, if you want to say it's oversaturated, I think it's saturated, but I don't think it's oversaturated.
And Tom, as usual, eloquently said by you about the topic of oversaturation of bowl games. You think there has been a lot of bowl games before, too, and probably too many, but it's good for the schools, right? It's good for the players, the families of these players, friends of these players. So I don't want to dog them and what they're getting out of the bowl games, because I sound like I guess I'm taking too hard of a stance on the bowl games, because I get it, where they're coming from. They get something out of it. And they get those nice gifts. Did you see some of the stuff they got, even for the Quick Lane Bowl? I was at the Quick Lane Bowl, obviously. Duke in Northern Illinois. And, not the most intriguing matchup, but for the players and what they get out of it, they get a backpack, they get headphones, some high-tech stuff, interesting stuff, and some really cool stuff as well that they wouldn't just get, obviously, Dom.
Yeah, and that's another thing. You get gifts. Your family's involved. You enjoy, the amenities around wherever you're at. In Orlando. Some of these bowl games. I saw a team getting on tractors, having fun with that. A lot of team bonding. Georgia football team. They were in at Disneyland in California for the Rose Bowl. So there's always good stories, good feel-good stories to hear. If they want to really change something with the bowl games, they could do a better job of scheduling where teams and make it more regionally attractive. I think a lot of it has to do with, why is Duke playing in Detroit, or why do we Quick Lane Bowl? But you gotta understand too, it is the Quick Lane Bowl, and fans I don't think they realize it. And if you don't like it, you don't watch it. Simple as that. And there is good football. Not everyone will watch football. I think there is a saturation of football, like I said before. However, to me, there's no oversaturation of it, and there's still really good football games, and even the football games we've seen here with the 6-6, 7-5 teams. Navy rolled past Virginia. Maybe not a really good game, but it was interesting to see. Navy. They were second. In FBS and rushing this year. A lot of it has to do with their triple option offense, but it's good to see. One of the one of the military schools in Division I. It's really good to see how they get really under-recognized and underappreciated for how good these teams are. And this, Navy was a good team this year at 6-6, but they still were second in rushing. So I think it gives them a little recognition as well. Teams like that.
And Dom, if you really get into football, you're going to love these bowl games almost no matter what. There's talent everywhere. And the thing is, nowadays, too, I've talked about this with other people. I don't think you yet, Dom, and I should have. You're my brother, and you love football too, and you know it more than I do. Well, those that really know football, the ins and outs, will find talent anywhere. In terms of guys being scouted for playing at the next level, you'll find these players now at Northern Illinois even, and at Navy, at Army, at Duke. Doesn't matter where you go to school nowadays, you're going to have some talent on all these teams. And that makes these matchups a bit more intriguing, right, than maybe they pop out at UAS.
Yeah, that's a good point, Vito. I think, you look at most, NFL draft pundits, they always have, Todd McShay always has, prospects to look out for during the game. And there's usually always, there's some teams that there's really not that many, but there's always, a couple teams that you don't know about too well that have draft prospects that are worth, watching for. And that's a good point, too. Another point I like to mention about this whole oversaturation issue is that, I think, during, especially the time of the year, I think you're looking at helps a lot too. I think, during the holiday season, there's really not that much on TV. And to me, eliminating some of these bowl games would probably put nothing on TV for a lot of people to watch. So as far as a revenue stream, it's really good for ESPN as well. Not that we're here profit-seeking corporations, but it's always a good revenue stream as far as that goes. But if you're a football fan, you're gonna watch football. If you're a baseball fan, you're gonna watch baseball, et cetera, et cetera. That's really the whole gist of the point that I'm trying to make with this oversaturation debate. And like we mentioned before about the prospects, there's a lot of good prospects. You look at some quarterbacks, Malcolm Perry on Navy, sophomore quarterback. You have guys like Josh Jackson, who's only a freshman for Virginia Tech. He had a really good year this year, broke the passing yards record in a single season for a Hokie. He's going to be good for years to come. You also had Mason Rudolph, who's supposed to be the number 5 quarterback. And there was a lot of intrigue in that Oklahoma State Tech game. A lot of prospects, James Washington, and the wide receiver. So, yes, and a lot of these teams, especially now, you see a lot of 9-win, 10-win teams. Those bowl games, obviously, they're going to be better. But there's always prospects no matter where you look.
Moving on to the NFL now, once again, and back to the Lions. Now, they play the Green Bay Packers, NFC North divisional matchup. But not a lot of intrigue surrounding it because of the fact that the Packers have Brett Hundley starting. They're not playing for anything. And our Detroit Lions, Dom, are yet again not playing for anything either. And for me, I wouldn't be showing up to the game. Now, if I got free tickets, I guess I would. I like Ford Field. I like the venue. But realistically, should Lions fans even care about this game? And should they be showing up to Ford Field for this contest?
I would say no. I think at this point, you're not in the playoffs now. We know there's no chance, the probability is at 0 for your chance of making the playoffs. And if you're a Lions fan looking at why not just watch this game on television, if you're really a true Lions fan, going to the game, unless you have something going on downtown and whatnot to get tickets lastly, but you're playing the Packers, that could also be a reason why you get tickets. But yeah, for a really cheap price, it's something to look at. But yeah, I would think it'd be good to stay home. And why would you want to see, if you complain about the team so much, why would you want to see them in a game where it's basically like a toilet bowl, meaningless game with coaches you don't like? There's no reason to spend more money on the tickets and boost the profit margin of Martha Ford if you wanted to fire Jimmy so much.
And now to our New Year's resolutions. I think it segues perfectly into that because for the Lions' sake, I think it comes down to firing Jim Caldwell and getting a true number 1 running back. Now, for all 4 major professional sports teams, now it's a little bit harder for us to look at the Red Wings. We don't really study them as closely or watch them as closely. But I would say for the Red Wings, from what I hear and see here and there watching a few games, time to fire Ken Holland. Get younger as well, right? Rebuild finally there with the Red Wings. Tigers keep rebuilding. And it'd be nice to get that young positional player that you can kind of build around for the future. That's something for them. And the Pistons are lacking a true superstar. But the first thing you do is not fire Stan Van Gundy or get rid of Andre Drummond, but do your best to get rid of Reggie Jackson. Whatever it takes, get rid of him, move on from him. He's hurt now. Ish Smith starting in his place. Langston Galloway has been playing as well, getting more minutes, I know. Those guys are capable enough to play with at point guard right now, but for the long-term future of the Pistons, I think they're better off without Reggie Jackson down. So now I'm looking at you for what you would say should be the New Year's resolution of each the Tigers, the Wings, the Pistons, and the Lions.
New Year's resolution for each team. First, we're going to go with the Lions. The Lions, they have to revamp their interior line and draft a running back. There's a lot of good running backs out there. I think this is even more important than a coach. I think they did well last season. Bob Quinn did well with, the exterior linemen. Ricky Wagner. Obviously, the right side of the line, there's a lot of injuries there. Taylor Decker's been hurt. You could move him back inside at some point as well. But the interior line needs to improve, especially in the right side, the right guard tag. Joe Dahl was playing there. But they need a running back. They need a guy, a bruiser. They need a guy like Bryce Love out there who's going to get between the tackles and get dirty for you. Unlike, guys like Amir Abdullah, who's been MIA, incognito, for the Lions for too long. And they got to get over this scat back love of, Theo Riddick and, Tian Green. He's a good guy. He's not very polished right now at this point, but that's my New Year's resolution for the Lions. And like I said, there's a lot of good running backs, including a guy like Nick Chubb as well, and Sony Michel. As far as the Red Wings go, to me, my New Year's resolution for them is to get younger. And that might have to do with the guy at the top making personnel decisions, and it's Ken Howland, and let him go. We've seen too far. It's been too long since there's been a guy that's come up, a young guy that's been superstar caliber for the Red Wings. It's unfortunate you see a guy like Austin Matthews in Toronto, who's thriving there right now for the Maple Leafs. You see a lot of younger guys in the NHL as well, and what hurts them too is you look at their former rivals, the Penguins, who it seems like every year they're always battling for the Stanley Cup. If they're not winning, they're just finishing runner-up. And I think the lack of superstar has done the Red Wings terribly. Obviously, Sidney Crosby there, and Pittsburgh's able to thrive because they have superstar. And I think it's important in hockey as well to have a superstar. For the Tigers, my New Year's resolution is to slowly slowly for a championship team, the next championship wave here. And I do think they should, as much as possible, continue to trim payroll, and eventually get rid of guys like Victor Martinez and Miguel Cabrera for the future. I think Miguel Cabrera should not be staying here as long. I think it's another Verlander scenario. In 2 to 3 years, I want Miguel Cabrera, and that's my New Year's resolution for 2018. I want Miguel Cabrera gone at some point. If I'm a Tigers fan, maybe not this year, but that's my resolution going forward for the Tigers. Trim as much payroll as possible, and eventually let go the former Triple Crown winner. For the Pistons, you go a lot of directions here. Fire Stan Van Gundy, trade Andre Drummond. Maybe the Reggie Jackson injury is a blessing in disguise. But I think the issue with the Pistons, moreover, has to be with their lack of firepower, lack of consistent shooting and consistent play from a guy like Stanley Johnson. He was taken before. He was taken number 8, I believe, two drafts ago. To me, Stanley Johnson has to play even better. He's got to become at least a star in this league, and a scoring star, good two-way player, good 3-and-D player. My New Year's resolution is a star caliber 3-and-D player, Stanley Johnson.
And now we got to talk about ourselves. Okay, we have to have New Year's resolutions as well that we won't really follow through with, but we're going to talk about them anyways because, well, it's still worth bringing up. Okay, even if we fail to really live up to the bill when it comes to our resolutions at large. For me, and this is off the top of my head, I want to get bigger, faster, stronger, sexier, all of the above, Dom, in the new year, and probably leave the Detroit Sports Podcast Network. Okay, Doc, I know you're listening to this. That is a joke. I want to stay at the DSP network, maybe get bigger. Probably not going to happen with that, but what we can do is strive to get bigger and better at the network as a whole. Land some interviews with the likes of Devin Funchess, notable professional athletes, things of that matter, I would say, are things that we want to aim for, that we're striving to achieve in 2018. And I know Doc would like to get me a girlfriend or something, too. That's a topic for another day. He can keep working on that for me as well. Dominic, to you now. Do you have a New Year's resolution that you can speak of? And I know this is kind of off the cuff here at this moment.
Funny because I really don't think of, resolutions going forward. I try to live, life one day at a time, 1 minute at a time, 1 hour at a time, as much as possible. I would say, to me, there's a lot of, I thrive off of a lot of what not to do. So maybe my New Year's resolution is not to be like the leaders of the free world. I'm not going to mention names. Whatever, just not to be as brash, not to be as brazen, not to be as egotistic, and others, other bad qualities that linger inside each and every one of us, and not to be a really good person, day in and day out, and strive, academically and professionally going forward this year, and make sure I have a harder work ethic going forward.
Wow. Great stuff to say, Dom. And you know what? I give you credit for bringing up all those great values that you hold, things that you want to work on to become a bigger and better person in 2018 and beyond. More power to you for that. Now, with all this being said, we're wrapping up things on Two Bad Hombres this week. How much do we have to pay you now for Tigers Talk and for this week's episode of Two Bad Hombres? I hope it's not too much. There's not too much in the budget left for 2017 at this point.
Whatever you got left in the budget, send it my way. You can send a check. You can just hand it to me, whatever, behind the dumpster at John's office, Doc's office, if you want. We can do any of the things, but I want the rest of the money by the new year.
Well, I guess we'll be able to rummage something up for you, Dom. Okay, you deserve something. I don't know how much money. We'll talk to the DOC there from Doc and Jock, John Charles Macaron, to figure out a nice total for you. All right, that's all I can say right now on the air for Two Bad Hombres for the last time in 2017. Happy New Year to everybody. Please stay safe, relax, and have a great time on New Year's Eve, New Year's Day as well with family and friends. Adios.
Head spin.